Before we get started, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing in this episode is medical advice, legal advice, or a recommendation to use any substance in or on the human body. Always do your own research and follow all applicable laws and regulations. Today we're talking about how to read a certificate of analysis like a pro and how to spot fake ones fast. This is one of the most important skills you can develop if you're buying peptides or really any research compound, because a label means nothing without proof behind it. Most people glance at a COA, see a percentage, and think they're good to go. That's where mistakes happen. A COA is only valuable if you know what you're actually looking at and, more importantly, what might be missing. Let's slow this down and break it into simple pieces so you can look at any COA and know within seconds whether it's legit, questionable, or straight up fake. First thing you want to look for is the lab. Not all labs are created equal. A real COA should come from a third-party lab, not the company selling the product. If the name of the lab looks generic, vague, or hard to verify, that's your first red flag. You should be able to take that lab name, look it up, and confirm it exists. Real labs have websites, certifications, and a track record. If you can't find anything about them, or the site looks like it was built in 5 minutes, you need to question it. Next is the sample identification. A proper COA will list exactly what was tested. This includes the compound name, the batch or lot number, and sometimes even a sample ID assigned by the lab. That batch number should match what you were given by the supplier. If there's no batch number, or it doesn't match, that COA might not even belong to your product. A lot of companies reuse the same COA over and over, even when the batch changes. That's a big problem. Now, let's talk about the test method. This is where things get a little more technical, but I'm going to keep it simple. Most peptide COAs will reference something called HPLC, which stands for high-performance liquid chromatography. What that means in plain English is the lab is separating the compound to measure purity. You'll usually see something like HPLC purity or assay percentage. This is the number everyone focuses on. If you see something like 99% purity, that sounds great, but you still need to ask, 99% of what, and how is it measured? A real COA should clearly state the method used, like HPLC, and sometimes the wavelength or conditions. If that section is blank or overly vague, that's another red flag. Now, let's look at the actual purity result. Most legitimate peptide COAs fall somewhere between about 95% and 99.5%. If you see a perfect 100%, be cautious. That's extremely rare in real-world testing. Chemistry isn't perfect, and neither are manufacturing processes. So when you see 100% across the board, it can sometimes mean the data was rounded, estimated, or worse, made up. Another thing to watch is consistency. If every single product from a company shows exactly 99.9% purity, that's suspicious. Real data has variation. Now, let's move into one of the most overlooked parts, and that's the chromatogram. This is the graph that comes with many COAs. It might look confusing at first, but it's actually one of the most useful tools you have. Think of it like a fingerprint. Each peak on that graph represents something in the sample. The main peak should represent your compound, and it should be the largest one by far. If you see multiple large peaks, that means there are other substances present. That could be impurities or degradation products. A clean chromatogram usually shows one dominant peak and very small minor ones. If the graph looks messy or crowded, that's not what you want. Also, make sure the chromatogram actually matches the data. If the report says 99% purity, but the graph shows multiple big peaks, something doesn't add up. Now, let's talk about dates. Every COA should have a test date and sometimes a report date. This tells you when the sample was actually analyzed. If you're buying a product today and the COA is from 2 or 3 years ago, that's not ideal. It doesn't necessarily mean it's fake, but it does mean it's outdated. Peptides can degrade over time, so a current COA is always better. Fresh data gives you more confidence in what you're getting. Another key detail is the analyst and approval signatures. A real COA will often include the name or signature of the person who performed the test and the person who reviewed it. If that section is completely blank or just has a generic stamp, it can be a sign the document wasn't properly issued by a real lab. Now, let's get into how to spot fake COAs quickly, because this is where things get interesting. First, look at the formatting. Fake COAs often look too clean or too generic. Real lab reports usually have a structured format, sometimes even a little messy or technical looking. If it looks like it was made in a basic template with minimal detail, be cautious. Second, check for copy and paste errors. You'd be surprised how often fake COAs have mismatched compound names, wrong batch numbers, or inconsistent data across the page. For example, the top might say one compound, but the chromatogram label says something else. That's a huge red flag. Third, verify the lab directly. This is one of the most powerful things you can do. Take the COA, find the lab's contact information from their official website, and reach out. Ask them if they actually performed the test for that batch. Real labs will confirm or deny it. Fake ones obviously won't. Fourth, look at the level of detail. Real COAs include things like method references, equipment used, and sometimes even calibration details. Fake ones tend to be overly simplified, just showing a name, a percentage, and not much else. Fifth, pay attention to the language. Real lab reports are written in a technical, consistent tone. Fake ones sometimes have odd phrasing, spelling errors, or inconsistent terminology. Now here's something most people don't think about. Even a real COA doesn't guarantee what you have in your hands matches that report. A company could have one good batch tested, get a clean COA, and then never test again. Or worse, they could use that same COA to represent completely different batches. That's why batch matching is so important. The COA should match your specific batch, not just the product name. If a company can't provide batch-specific COAs, that's something you need to take seriously. Another advanced tip is looking for multiple tests. Some high-quality suppliers will provide more than just purity. They might include mass spectrometry, which confirms the molecular weight, or additional impurity profiling. The more data you see, the better. It shows a higher level of transparency and quality control. Let's bring this all together into a simple checklist you can run through in your head. Check the lab and make sure it's real and verifiable. Check the batch number and make sure it matches your product. Look at the test method and make sure it's clearly stated. Review the purity number and make sure it's realistic. Examine the chromatogram and make sure it supports the data. Look at the dates and make sure they're current. Check for signatures or analyst information. And finally, scan for anything that looks inconsistent or off. If something feels off, trust that instinct and dig deeper. The goal here isn't to become a chemist overnight. It's to become aware. Once you understand what a real COA looks like, fake ones start to stand out very quickly. And the more you look at them, the easier it gets. After a while, you'll be able to spot issues in seconds instead of minutes. Before we wrap up, I want to say this again clearly. Just because a COA exists does not mean a product is safe, effective, or appropriate for any use. This information is for research and education only, and it's your responsibility to verify everything independently and follow all applicable laws and guidelines. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. Don't trust the label. Trust the data, and verify the data. Thanks for listening, keep learning, and stay curious.